Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. This is the Art of Pricing. I am Talia Lockard, your host, and today we are going to be talking about expiring inventory. We've had some interesting twists from our practice yesterday to today that has been an exciting thing to talk about. And then at the end, in the last probably like 3 to 5 minutes, we're going to actually pull my automated rate tool up and look at a couple things in there. First off, we have Billy O'Sullivan, who is the CEO, property manager, end all be all of Princeville Vacation Rentals and other, I don't know, you like how many different places are you property manager of?
Lots of fingers for many pies.
And now with the Open Hearth Inn in Maine, so we have different perspectives to think of Hawaii versus Maine, very, very different. We have Laurina Stapleton, who is our director of implementation and very seasoned revenue manager. And we also have Valerie, who is also a very seasoned revenue manager. She is from Rented as well. She is a second time Art of Pricing guest on here. So we are excited, to talk about this today. So expiring inventory. Whenever we started revenue management, I always hear revenue managers say this term, expiring inventory. And I have to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I had no clue what they were talking about. I was just like, okay, cool. That's a cool term. So Valerie, I'm going to put you on the spot, even though you're the last person that we put in here. Give me a definition for expiring inventory.
So, as you know, in our industry, what we're selling is time. You only have so long to sell it before you never have the opportunity to sell it again. So expiring inventory is inventory that you're basically losing the opportunity to sell. And that window is going to vary market to market, just depending on your booking window and booking trends. So it's that last shot to get things booked.
Mm-hmm. And it's market to market, day to day, which we'll talk to you about later. Billy, what is your quick expiring inventory definition?
I always liken it to what's in the fridge. There's the eggs, and that last egg is going to expire at some point, so you either need to use it or lose it. Yeah, and it's also a tool and an indicator of exactly how well you've planned to a certain extent up to that point. Sometimes you plan to try to keep some inventory very close to expiring, so you're pacing yourself and rationing yourself so that you can maybe get great money for that expiring inventory. So it's also an indicator of your market and how well you've planned to that point.
I was thinking about your refrigerator example whenever I was making a grocery list yesterday, and the use it or lose it thing. I went so far into thinking like, okay, so if I don't use it and I buy something else, I'm in negative ROI. I went very far on myself with my fridge revenue management.
I just sniff the milk. Just sniff, and if it's like, ooh, no go, yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, milk, right? It's known by everybody. You go past expiration. Laurina, what your expiring revenue management definition or thought that you want to share?
I mean, I agree with everything everybody said. I pay attention mostly, I think, especially now, but COVID, I guess post-COVID, even though not really post-COVID.
Whatever world we're in right now.
Midway.
Is like paying attention and really looking at that booking window that Valerie touched on. Expiring inventory is going to be so different depending upon what market you're in. Billy's in Hawaii. You might look at 14, 30 days as expiring inventory in Hawaii, whereas if you're in New York, you might look at like 1 to 2 days type thing. So really knowing what your booking window is helps. I mean, that's the number one thing to know for sure.
And you made a really good point yesterday too, right? Like it's knowing your booking window, obviously knowing your properties and knowing your market, right? And knowing the changes in your market. So you had a good example, Laurina, yesterday about the international strategies as we're talking about whatever mid-COVID world that we're in today, right? Like when, before it's like planned travel versus what was it? Spontaneous. I can't think of that word. You went into that. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm actually here. I'm in Europe right now. I'm in Croatia, in Dubrovnik, which I love. And I mean, not to brag too much or anything.
Humble brag. I'm in Croatia, everybody.
And we have a lot of family friends here, and most of the people here own second apartments that they rent out. And what was really interesting is when, after last summer, which was dead, they said that they were getting a decent amount of last minute bookings, people that are in their drive market from Bosnia, from Montenegro, from other areas in Croatia. So it was a lot of either their booking window shrunk, and they were getting people, and I know Billy sees this in Maine, that were extending their stays just because they decided, hey, I'm not going to drive home. Now that the international travel has started to really pick up, it's switching kind of, and not even fully switching. They're getting a little bit of both, like a mix, where now it's people who are booking further in advance, because if you're coming from the US to Croatia, typically that's a pretty far out booking window. And they're very rigid on their dates. They've got flights in and out type thing. So trying to figure out the balance of, okay, I did one switch before and now I'm doing another switch again. I mean, I say to people all the time that, like, if you were a revenue manager before, I don't care how much experience you had, this past year, you've totally relearned revenue management.
I mean, it's so true, right? And that's one thing that it is, like, everyone is relearning, especially in our industry, right? And having, to figure out the best way. But I think that it's an important thing for us to remember. And I think Billy, you might have said this yesterday, is I don't think we're going to get to a point where XYZ is the way to do things anymore. We are going to have to know how to stay on our toes and go with the flow with these changes, because I think everything is going to continue to change as our world has just changed. It's that simple, and change isn't bad, but it's changed. Billy, I think that, before we move on to the next question, with Maine, Hawaii, I want you to kind of touch on that, the extending stay and that strategy that you do for expiring inventory in the inn sometimes.
Well, yeah, recently having this new inn on our hands, we've changed our bait, so to speak, with our expiring inventory. And I want to just remind everyone that it's totally okay to do that. Don't be afraid to think that for, like Laurina said, in Hawaii, anything inside of about 14 days, probably isn't swimming over from the mainland, so to speak, but they're close enough on Oahu or, on the Big Island or Maui to extend a stay and fly over real quick. So our extending stay bait probably switches from a longer term lure to something that's a little closer and spicier for people that are in Hawaii. Now, to take that to a whole different level, in Maine, we're at the gateway to Acadia National Park, which is one of the top 10 national parks in the nation. So there's 3 million people that drive right by this inn. And we're finding that if we leave a couple of dates closed, like if we have 2 nights closed, that there's a ton of people that will stay at our inn, that will drive to the park and then stay too long and want to come back and stay an additional night. So they're coming back and they're begging us for a room when it says no occupancy or no vacancy out front. And we really have a hidden room, and they're over the top. It's like instant 10-star. Oh my God, you saved my room for me. So we've kind of done a little trickery. And and then that also gives us some time, which it hasn't come back to bite us. Laurina asked me yesterday, boom, how many times does that come to bite you? Well, none yet, but if it looks like it's coming to that point where it might bite us, there's so much maintenance that needs to be done here. And I've got a great team here that's highly skilled. So if we need to go in and replace a window air conditioner, or we need to go in and do like some work to add a mini split or something like that, we could actually use that time. I don't feel like this summer it's going to come and bite me, but that's just been another lure that we've put on our expiring inventory.
And a question I just thought of, if it did come and bite you, how would you react?
I would smile, because you know what? Sometimes if you try things and you fail, it's okay. And then I would probably not hold 2 rooms or any rooms for a while because it stung.
Right. You live and you learn. I mean, if I've learned anything from revenue management, it's just a whole test and learn. I mean, our industry is test and learn, let's be honest. But revenue management, that's really what it is. So Valerie, we're going to go to you again.
Okay.
So if someone is new into, thinking about this expiring inventory strategy, and they're like, hey, I need, you're right, I need to get looking at this. Maybe there's some revenue I'm leaving on the table. What should they be thinking about first?
Ooh, that's a heavy question. I mean, I would think about what your goal is. I am a big believer in knowing what you want to achieve before developing your strategy. Otherwise, what's your strategy for? So the biggest question I would have is like, are you looking to just make sure everything fills in? You want to be at 100% occupancy, or do you want a specific type of guest, a specific type of stay? And then evaluating your booking windows. That's going to be really important. We've kind of mentioned it here and there. Depending on like how last minute you actually take reservations, will depend on when you need to be making those adjustments for expiring. If people aren't booking within, 2, 3, 4 days, that's not when you want to make your last minute adjustments. And then you also want to consider what's happening in the market. So like I have some accounts in Atlanta where like they may be the last to sell in that specific building. And in that case, we actually may go up last minute. We may look and see what else is available in the market. Okay, we're the last 5 things left. We know there is plenty of same day demand. We may go up. For other accounts, they may have the attitude of like, I just want to make sure I have heads in beds. If it's not booked 2 days out, I want to drop, I want to get it filled. And so you really need to understand like what your primary objective is and then use your strategy to help guide you there.
Now, a couple questions came up in my mind for that. So one question that we should have said is, what is the time frame for expiring inventory?
I mean, it's pick your market. I mean, you got to look at when your demand is for last minute stays. Is it same day? Like some urban markets, your expiring window starts at like 2 o'clock the day of arrival. Not even like in the morning. You can usually keep your rate until noon. In some markets like Hawaii, it requires more planning, especially in COVID, where you have to like have a negative COVID test to get from the mainland and like all of that. And so then, people can't just make that last minute stay. So you really just have to watch your market and look at your historical data. When do people book? And don't just look back 3 years, look at the last month. Look at the last 3 weeks. COVID has changed everything. So look at it all.
We're basically saying, like, depending on your market, it's possible that you are looking at your revenue strategy up until 2 hours before booking. So if you don't have someone responsible for doing this, how do you make these changes while checking guests in or guests have issues? So think, having those responsibilities in certain areas in your departments is so, so, so important, because if one person is trying to get someone in with a guest and the other person is trying to sell some nights, those are 2 very important things that we have to think about. Valerie basically said everything that Laurina and I talked about yesterday when we talked about, you don't always have to drop rate. Laurina, I want you to dive into that, because you, like last week we were talking about something before even our pricing, and I like saved it in my Slack, and you just beautifully said like, you don't have to drop rate. And there was a good example. I'm putting you on the spot. Just come up with it, I guess. I definitely saved it, but I want you to say it.
I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think people, the number one assumption is, okay, expiring inventory. If I have inventory in the next week, 2 weeks, whatever your booking window looks like, drop rate, and get it full. But like Valerie said, that's not always the case. I mean, there's obviously booking window like we talked about, but also knowing your market occupancy is more important now than it ever was before. I mean, it always was important, but even more now because things are changing super rapidly. So I think, not having the assumption that it's immediately drop rate, that's how I sell expiring inventory. That's my strategy, is I'm just dropping rate. Sometimes it is. And for some markets it can be. But really being dialed in and not just making those like, oh, okay, let me just drop this to minimums and bottom out this rate is, I think, probably one of the biggest mistakes that people make.
And I think, the other thing I was thinking about, Valerie, and I think we would all agree, is like knowing your goals. If you're listening to, this recording or the webinar today, and you're like, I don't know what my goals are, and you are an owner, get off this call and set your goals. If you are a property manager and you don't know what your owner's goals are, get with your owners. Because if you have owners that say, you know what, I don't want to sell the night before, I don't want same day check-ins, don't worry about their expiring inventory. People, I'd like to have heads and beds, or I'd like to, if we can sell it, but let's do it if we know, if we can hold rate or increase revenue. You can put them in buckets, right? To make this a little bit easier for you. So if you don't have the goal, define your goal, is where we are with that. So biggest pain points when it comes to expiring inventory. Billy, I'm going to pick on you first.
That's great. Yeah, so I always put a lot of pressure on myself because, like what Valerie and Laurina, everybody said, there's different situations, you have different expectations, you have different strategies, you have owners, you may be an owner, all of these different things. And so you have all of this weight on your shoulders. And so the biggest pain point for me is my own brain and the fact that I always worry about things. And the nice thing about having these kinds of conversations and these kinds of tools is that it really gives you an edge up on the competition, because if art isn't helping you get exactly where you need to be with your strategy, and you feel like you have pain over it, just ask somebody, reach out and talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big reason why I love this community, is that if there is pain and it's not self-inflicted, it's your own dang fault for not reaching out and asking somebody else for help. Because I know from Laurina, Valerie, you, so many other people at Rented, so many other people in the community, whether I've ever met them or not, mm-hmm. that if there's pain, you can work it out with somebody else, because there's always cool people, always smart people around.
Totally. I think that we are a community of warriors by chosen careers, and probably the amount of caffeine we all drink to keep up with our careers. I say that as I'm on my third cup of coffee today. But you also said something yesterday. It's, go with your gut, and you go with your gut feeling, right? Don't be afraid if your gut's saying don't do it, right? And if you're not really quite sure and you're worrying, there is a community. There's big, there's us, there's Beyond Pricing, there's Wheelhouse, there's Price Labs, all these different revenue manager consultants out there. There are Facebook groups. People are willing to help you no matter what. And, to Billy's point, if you don't even know how to search for the help, right? Then you should be partnering with a tool that can do this for you and can help you out about that. I wrote a lovely article on swimming lessons and sinking and revenue management, if anybody wants to check that out, that talks about this exact thing. Valerie, what would you say are some big pain points?
I think a lot of times people focus on price and not policy. I see this a lot where people will say I just really, really want that 3-night stay on the weekend. Yeah, we all want things. Wanting something doesn't mean we're going to get it. And sometimes we do have to make concessions and adjustments to try to achieve that. And so I think just making sure that everything that you have working for you is working for you, because you have a lot of tools other than just your nightly rate. So if your last minute stays are always really short, maybe you do need to reduce down that nightly minimum, and just really consider all the different pieces of the puzzle, because I feel sometimes we get tunnel vision on one thing, and that may actually not be the hindrance.
Mm-hmm. I love how this session has turned into expiring inventory and life lessons. Has anyone else noticed how many amazing life lessons we're getting out today? Welcome to the Art of Pricing. We're just going to give lessons today. That's what we should have said. Laurina, you tell about your pain points, and you're talking about being a risk taker yesterday.
I feel like my pain point meshes with the excitement part too. I actually said yesterday, I probably should stay away from Vegas, because this whole gambling with how far can I push rate and how is borderline addicting to me. So marrying that with the data, obviously, just playing with it, seeing how far you can push it, and obviously paying attention to the data and your market and all of that stuff. So I don't know that I would necessarily call it a pain point because I find it really exciting most of the time. Everybody calls me a nerd about it, but you know.
I love it. And I mean, and that's like, we have like a team of what, 6, 7 revenue managers, and they all are kind of the same, right? Like, you know, it's like, I might think I'll ask a question because I'm not a revenue manager. While I understand it, right? I'll ask them a question and they're like, oh yeah, I mean, this is simple and this is the response. And I sit there and I'm like, come again, English?
I think what's funny too is our team, Valerie can probably speak for this too, especially now post COVID. Some of these markets are getting like rates that we've never even seen before. So it's been really, really fun for all of us to kind of look and be like, I doubt it's going to hit this rate, but you know what, let me look at the market. All right, I'm going to try it. I'm going to leave it there for 24, 48 hours, kind of see what it does. And boom, it books. And you're like, it's like the most exciting, it's like you won the lottery. It's crazy.
That's awesome. So we have about 8 minutes left, and I promised everybody that we would have an expiring inventory live strategy. So there is an interesting part of this strategy from when we practiced this, or not practiced, talked about it yesterday to today within less than 24 hours. So I'm going to let Laurina pick up her screen and kind of explain yesterday what we said, and then what happened when she looked at it today.
Yeah. Can you see my screen here?
Yes.
See art pulled up.
This is the art interface, just, you know, to show you guys what we're looking at. And these are Billy's properties. We're not showing anybody the properties.
These are some of Billy's properties on Hawaii, in Hawaii. And what we did was I just kind of took a look at the next 14 or so days. And yesterday we were looking at, okay, you know, what kind of inventory do we still have available to sell? And we talked about this weekend, the weekend of the 18th and 19th.
It was June 18th and 19th. So what, that's next weekend?
Yeah, not this coming weekend, next weekend.
Oh,
yeah.
It's Father's Day weekend too. I don't know if that had anything to do with it.
You can see that here. Pops up Father's Day. Just a little shameless plug there. So we talked about, you know, I'd asked Billy like, hey, do you know what's going on in the market? Because again, you know, the people in the market obviously know the market the best. And it seemed like there was a decent amount of inventory available. And Billy said, yeah, you know, they've been talking a lot about, you know, that's kind of when school gets out, and then people are getting all their stuff together, and then they're going to start traveling for summer. So it kind of made sense. Like, okay, the thought yesterday was, all right, we're going to want to look at potentially dropping rates because demand is going to be and is lower. So we planned on kind of talking about that today. But what was interesting is I went, sorry, move that. I went and I looked at this weekend, just maybe an hour or so ago. Pulled up the 18th to the 20th, and there are now 5 properties available for.
And this is what you mean by, like, now more than ever, you need to be paying attention to your market occupancy. Because it just so happened you didn't make any changes yesterday, right? And now looking at today, so if I'm understanding this correctly, right? Yesterday we would have dropped rates. Today we might increase them.
Yeah, today, I mean, what I immediately would do is say, okay, there's only 5 units left. I'm going to look at what the other units are priced at and potentially increase rate if we can. So we have this property. Sorry, it's hard to see with this. We have this property here that has the Friday and Saturday available, and this has the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I first took a look at Friday and Saturday. And just looking at some of the comps here, you know, we got 360s, 5s.
That is not my property with a 4.25 rating, just so everybody knows. We don't play that game.
Yes, all of Billy's properties are 5 stars.
For the guys with the super in front, those guys.
Yes, this is one of Billy's properties. Then we got in the 6s, this is a 2-bedroom. So, and then we got in the 7s. So being that there's only 5 available, my initial thought is, okay, I want to be in the 6s, somewhere in the high 6s. So what I would do is, for this Friday and Saturday, art or any pricing tool makes this relatively easy to do. So I would want to adjust this. So this is in the high sixes here. Again, the dynamic pricing with the tool will kick in. So if let's say we get a ton of bookings again, it will bump it up. So getting this in the range that you want to be in, and letting the dynamic pricing part really guide it is super helpful.
And to explain that, in other words, like basically it like say all the tools will help you do this, is you're saying, hey, like I want it to be higher than what the tool is suggesting today, but I still want it to go with the market and demand. Right? So rather than just putting a fixed rate of 667 and missing out on any kind of changes that could be made in the dynamic world.
Yeah, because if you put a fixed rate of 667 here, and then overnight there was 3 more bookings and they were all low rated bookings, and now your 667 is super low, you don't give the tool the opportunity to bump it up, and you left money on the table there.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, we have 2 minutes left, so is there anything else you want to share on this?
Sorry to cut you off. I might have a little bit of a lag. So two things on this. First of all, I love the fact that everything that we know is wrong. I mean, like, are we in the Matrix? This is great. It's not lame. It's not boring. I mean, we have all these cool things that affect our business, but then you have this changing market. And it's wonderful. So check in on this tool or any tool that you use every day. Like, spend 5 minutes with a cup of coffee, because you never know what you're going to find. You never know what low-hanging fruit or what fruit you're gonna pick. And then I guess also just think, like, if there's 2 or 3 nights there, those people are not going to fly over from the mainland for 2 or 3 nights. So they're probably on another island. So if you're using Facebook groups, or if you're using these other types of marketing, and you want to poke over and try to pull somebody over into these, this expiring inventory, like Valerie said, be very aware of your strategy and where they're coming from.
I love that you said it. And I love, we are relearning everything. And I have to say, like, for myself, I mean, I'm very passionate about vacation rental industry and what we do when it comes to helping people and networking and just, the supporting small business aspect of it. This whole relearning part has been very exciting, even in an industry where it's already exciting, because it's like, oh, wow, I thought we knew everything. We don't. Right. And we're learning that all, more. It's really awesome. But Valerie, what would be like some of your last takeaways or advice or whatever you want to say?
I just want to echo what Billy said. It's kind of fun. Like, have a good time with it. There is low-hanging fruit. Just watch what your trends are. Take advantage of it. If you're trying to find something or achieve something new, like, do more than just change your rate or change your nightly stay. Like, try to drive that business. And also, sometimes just tweaking your price is going to help you bump up in search. So even if you feel like you're at the right rate, move it $10. Like, sometimes even just that little tweak will set someone off who's been looking, like, oh, I need to do this now. I've done that with flights before. It's been like 130 and now all of a sudden it's 140 and I'm like terrified it's going to go up. So now I'm booking. So, think about what people are doing in your own behaviors.
That's awesome. And Laurina.
I guess I'm going to reiterate, like, for the 5th time, like, pay attention to your market right now. It's so important. It was always important, like I said before, but paying attention to how fast things are. And you have to move quickly. So if you don't have the time for this, hire a revenue manager, hire a pricing tool, whatever needs to happen so that you can make sure that you are on top of this, because you can leave money on the table so easily.
Totally. And what I've heard for everything is, like, trust your gut, right? Don't be afraid to test and learn it. You need to be checking it every day, and you need to know what your market is doing every day. Just because you knew what your market was doing Monday doesn't mean that that's what your market's going to be doing on Thursday. It's a very important thing that we need to remember. Well, thank you all 3 so much for joining me today on The Art of Pricing. This was another really awesome episode. I'm so happy that we have so many great people who are willing to participate. Next week, we are actually going to be diving either like our second episode of how to use, what having a good reservation team and guest experience can help maximize revenue, which is kind of in terms going to using your resources, which is another thing we have been saying over and over again. So please tune in. If you have any questions or like to talk to Laurina, Valerie, or Billy, or me, we would be so happy to talk to you and add you into our crazy hectic days, as long as you don't mind babies and
Just call me on my
dogs
cell phone. Yeah,
on
just
the
call me on my cell.
road. Awesome, guys. Well, thank y'all. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Aloha.